guys, it's Sophie and welcome to an incredibly late February wrap-up. I've just sort of been quite busy these last few weekends and haven't had a chance. I have so many books to show you. I'll show you the stack, it's kind of precarious at the moment. So those are my read books for the month of February. I'm going to be splitting them into fiction and classics, and then into graphic novels and non-fiction, just to make it a bit more palatable. You probably noticed that I've been struggling trying to figure out how to do my wrap-ups. They're changing so much, but I think this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to split them into categories so that if you're interested in a particular type of book, then you can focus in on that. I read an awful lot and it's just really hard to make it into one video, and I think it's boring when it's in lots of different sections. Okay, so the first one I have to talk about is The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. I read The Secret History recently and that was my first Donna Tartt, and I just wanted to go and try out a few more of hers. This is a sort of southern gothic novel. It's told sort of around these two children who are sort of exploring life and trying to determine at the base of it how one of their younger siblings was killed, whether he was murdered, whether it was an accident, and trying to come to terms with death. And in doing so they end up embroiled in the underside of this society, dealing with sort of drug dealers, dealing with really quite unstable people, and it's sort of childhood games and childhood pranks going really badly wrong. As I say, I did enjoy this one, but not as much as The Secret History. I think the writing is gorgeous, the same as the last one was, and I do find her really easy to read. I did find that it was something I could kind of fly through, so if you like her writing then I would recommend it, but I don't think it's as good as The Secret History personally. And then the next one is Revenge of the Mooncake Vixen by Marilyn. I know a few people on BookTube have spoken about this one already and really enjoyed it, and I'm joining that opinion to the pile. It's brilliant, it's really brilliant. It's about these young sort of Chinese immigrants who are living in the United States, and about their perception of the United States and their role as they see it in the country. The writing's amazing and the sort of cultural mix is really incredible. I love the sort of folk tale, fairy story kind of tellings of these modern tales. The character of their grandmother is brilliant, it's stunning, and I would definitely be picking up anything else that she writes. Really enjoyed the writing style, really enjoyed the stories, thought it was a really clever idea. And then the next one I have is a short story collection. It's Sea Lovers by Valerie, and this is a collection of stories on three main themes. They're around sort of young love, around the arts, and around transformation of humans into animals. I think this is quite a mixed bag, as short story collections can tend to be. There are a couple in there that I thought were brilliant and some I found really dull. I didn't so much enjoy the ones focusing around the lives of artists, although there was one called The Unfinished Novel that was really quite stunning, and somehow felt like a novel despite its length. And the title story, Sea Lovers, was brilliant. It's a mermaid story with that sort of vicious undertones that traditional mermaids have. So really enjoyed this one. I don't think I would necessarily recommend it. I think I would recommend you try and read some of her work if you can, but I did find that some of the stories I just don't think had the same sort of form and style as some of the others did. She does mention, I think, in the introduction that it's a way of her showing her writing over the years, and I think you see that. I think that you see her storytelling ability develop throughout the book, and I would potentially pick up more of her work, but I don't think it's something I'm going to run out and do. But if you are interested in that kind of topic, then have a read, but not my favourite, I don't think. And then the next one I have is a book called Manhattan Mayhem, and this was just pouring all over my Instagram when it came out. It's a very pretty book. I've spoken about it a little bit before, but now I've finished it I feel like I can tell you I really didn't like this book. I just didn't enjoy the stories at all. I didn't feel as though they had any flair to them. I didn't feel as though they were particularly sort of good mysteries. I just really didn't enjoy it. I thought there might be a few that would turn it around, and I can honestly say I didn't enjoy a single story in this collection. Sorry to all of the authors who are in this collection who, you know, clearly do very well for themselves. Maybe I'm not the target audience perhaps, but just really rubbish in my opinion. Sorry. And then the next one I have is Human Acts by Kang. This one has generated a fair bit of buzz around BookTube. I know that The Vegetarian sort of kicked that all off for us. Just a sort of warning for people who are interested in this story. It's really difficult to read. I don't mean technically, I don't mean the language is hard. I mean the topic is very difficult to read about. It sort of speaks a lot about the dead and the sort of casualties of conflict and the casualties of going against the grain and against sort of rebellion. But it's speaking about corpses in quite a lot of detail. It's speaking about the way that human interactions are playing into this death. And there's sort of one moment where you follow, throughout the book, you sort of follow different perspectives, that you follow the spirit of this dead boy who has been killed, and it was really quite harrowing. It's very good. And if you aren't sort of shy about topics that are difficult and about death in your books, then I would say it's worth reading. I think it was quite enlightening, but very depressing, and I had to read it in quite short bursts. I couldn't sit down with this book and sort of let it take me away. I didn't want to go where it was going to take me. And then the last book of modern fiction I have to talk to you about today is The First Bad Man by Miranda July. I loved this book. I'd been seeing it in bookshops all over the place. I thought it was a really intriguing cover, something about it really pulled me in, but hadn't got round to it. Thought it was going to be, you know, potentially a little bit odd. It just felt a little bit odd. It was so odd and it was so good. Please go and read this. This is my sort of recommendation for the month of all the books I've read. This was by far my favourite. It's really weird. It deals with sort of unusual sexuality. It deals with the sort of habits people fall into when they live alone, when they live sort of in isolation from other people. It deals with sort of mental health and the odd ways in which people sort of self-diagnose. It's a very sexual book, so if you don't like, you know, references to sex in your book, then I wouldn't suggest you pick this up. But everyone else, just please do. It's a really odd, really honest, really raw depiction of sexuality, and it's sort of perverse. I don't really know how to describe it. It feels naughty when you're reading it, and not because it's sort of erotic. It's the way that she's talking about sex, the way that she's talking about her emotions and her body and her sort of image as an older woman who is sort of engaging with other women. It was brilliant. Go and read it. It's very strange, but definitely one of my favourite things I've read so far this year. Okay, and on to classics. I only read 2 this month, so not too many to go over. The first one is one that you know I've been battling with for a little while, and that is Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I struggled, didn't I? So I kept chatting to you guys and saying that I was trying and that I'd read a little bit more and that I was sort of taking it slowly, and I struggled. And then I was on the train and I had a really long train journey, and I picked it up and it like just sort of took off. Like, I just couldn't put it down, and it was a very odd experience. The sort of messages I found quite preachy. I think they still are quite preachy, and sort of a little bit unbearable to start with. I sort of adapted to his view, so I could see the way that he was perceiving things, and actually the writing and the ideas and the philosophy is beautiful, and completely carried me away. He speaks a lot on the sort of interaction between humans and nature, and the sort of natural world and the urban world in which many of us live, a little bit about labour as well. But it's absolutely gorgeous, and I found myself, through reading this book, sort of falling in love with Walden Pond, as he did, and it was absolutely gorgeous. It didn't really feel like it was non-fiction. It felt sort of very sort of picturesque and beautiful and gorgeous, and a beautiful novel of self-exploration. I'm really, really glad I read it, and I'm really glad I kept going with it, because I struggled so much to try and see how he was viewing things to start, and it put me off, but the payoff is worth it. If you thought about this but haven't got round to it, or it feels just a little bit too heavy or fat for a classic, then I would suggest you just try it and see what you think, because it just really opened up for me about halfway through. Okay, and the last book we have for this half of my wrap-up is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, which is beautiful, and every time I show it to you guys I'm going to remind you that I think it's beautiful. So this was my second Virginia Woolf, I think. Yeah, I read 3 and this was the second. And it's a story about a family who are living on a beach, and they have a young son who wants to go across the sea to go see this lighthouse. and that's how it sort of starts. It starts with this family picture of this father who says no, it's going to storm, we're never going to get there, the mother who's trying to sort of inspire hope in this child, and the child sort of being torn between the two but hoping desperately that they'll get to go there. And then the novel sort of develops, and it does so beautifully. I think this was definitely my favourite of the 3 Virginia Woolfs that I've read. It develops into this story about our expectations of our lives, where we think we're going to be, and the way that we can sometimes hold ourselves back, that other people can hold us back. It's a gorgeous sense of place. I think the sort of imagery that was used just puts you straight into the story, that you feel as though you're sort of an onlooker almost to this drama. The sense of time was lovely, how you sort of have quite natural progressions and then jumps in time that don't feel unnatural or stilt the story. They feel as though you've just looked away for a moment, and when you look back, things have developed in an interesting way. As always with Virginia Woolf, the writing is stunning. I have to say, I think probably if I hadn't read this one, if I'd just read Orlando and The Waves, which are the 2 others that I read, I don't think I would have thought I liked her that much. But having read this one, it sort of changed my opinion. I absolutely adored this one, and we'll be reading A Room of One's Own soon, and I think had I not had this in my 3 Woolf sort of collections that I've read so far, I wouldn't be all that interested in her, but this is something that really appealed to me. All her books seem to be quite different, so maybe it's something that you guys would find useful, that if you haven't enjoyed one of her books, try another, because they do all vary in terms of the way she tells stories, the sort of structure and form, and really the sort of type of story that she writes. I mean, Orlando is more fantasy than anything else, but this is like a family drama, so maybe just try another Woolf would be my sort of end point for this one. So those are the fiction books that I read in the month of February. I hope you've enjoyed this. Maybe you found a little bit something new to read. Let me know if you've got anything that you're really excited about at the moment or that you think I should check out. I'd love to know. Hope you're having a lovely day, and I will see you soon with part 2. Alright, bye bye.